Holy Hyperspace Freakout, a DPT trip report by St. Eric, posted to earwid.org July 18th, 2000. Before I get into this report, I just wanted to clear up the fact that this guy refers to himself in the third person throughout this report, so he'll actually reference himself as being Eric, so it'll sound like he's talking about someone else, but he's actually talking about him. So on Tuesday, Eric set himself up horizontal with a tape recorder, a magic journal, water, earplugs, a blindfold, etc., and snorted 250 milligrams of DPT, the pure powder, a foul-tasting and odorous product. After 10 minutes, I was very shaky, trembling, vibrating. The same vibrations that rock the skeleton spread to shake the whole room. He tears off his earplugs and blindfold. Pan has entered the inner room. Panic. The air is dense with shifting, dancing fractal shrimp. Geometry of visions is sharp, sliding. No thing is solid. How was I ever fooled into thinking it was in the first place? No thing can be held in my hands for too long. No place to observe from, no repose. Cannot rest on a blanket and pillow, which are molecules racing up to light speed, and the poor primate nervous system protests quantum physics in everyday life. He vomits fluorescent yellow and green into a crystal bathtub, suddenly sucked into an alternate world, out on the shimmering night streets with dark purple women. Now, back in the room. How long was he gone? Is this still going on? The world's gushing alive. Next, he's a yogi, suddenly overwhelmed with psychic energy. The third eye and crown chakra explode, eyes and mouth shocked open, doubled over onto knees. Sky of room invaded, blooming with fierce fire wheels. Mandalas send flaming electric shards to pierce repeatedly with real as any phenomenal skin mutilation. The jolts enter muscles, nerves, moaning and screeching in pain. Helpless. The next world was a room with some guy in it. Eric has repeatedly done work to arrange situations and experiences and experiments so as to entertain himself, and then to write down what happens. But this time, he's gone too far. The experiment was too powerful, and consumed the laboratory. The guy begins yelling, "What the fuck did you do this for?" "I don't know." Both of them experience terrible fear, breaking up simultaneously with the room into cells, molecules, light, shaking violently as in an apocalyptic earthquake. Conceptions burnt out of skulls by endless light. The whole universe itself falls apart. All colours in electric air whirlpool into a mandala, eaten up forever. That's it. The world is over. Watching from the outside, it's very obvious that the human world was as stable as a house of toothpicks. It was amazing it didn't fall apart sooner in history. But the hideous human angel hasn't been crawling along the planet that long at all. And now, someone had pulled the plug out accidentally. He would find himself several times in a quasi-human world, with various bodies. Man, woman, old bum, machine, a teen girl, a cartoon, etc. With a fully different set of memories and characteristics, living some schizoid life for a few intense minutes, and then the whole thing would be eaten up into a mandala that throbs in space, and would never fail to shock and horrify him. It's cold out here. Where's home? I want to go back. Where is home? Once, floating bodiless, no limbs to flail in protest, he asked why was the whole Earth human-ape contraption ever even running? Why does everyone have to struggle and suffer and get caught in animal drama, if it's all just going to close down anyway, and nobody gets no thing? Answer: it wasn't what you thought it was. It was not a difficult test. The organic world is like a ride, a warm 3D roller coaster. Once you get on it, you forget you were ever anywhere else, because you're so overwhelmed by the colours and nerve explosions and density of it all. From outside, this is clear. The universe is such a festive, holy space. To have meat bodies, what an opportunity for joy that is. So meanwhile, inside the wheel, inside the Earth world which goes on, whilst a few escape momentarily to see it from afar, as psychonauts or by death, death lets you out. Eric's body vehicle was raging psychotic, involved in all sorts of instinctive surrealism. With the source of attention chemically locked in other dimensions, the body continued to act upon itself in the environment, thrashing, howling, broke up an empty fish tank as well that was in the room, throwing glass into the bathtub, with which it climbed into wearing thermal underpants, and proceeded to use soap and glass shards to wash itself or something. Perhaps it was enjoyable. Maybe the glass looked very beautiful. Maybe it seemed like flowers or sponges or pieces of the body of God. I don't know. I don't remember. At this point, the neighbours across the hall called the police and rescue squad, because sound effects mimicked someone being severely beaten. Isn't the human world so funny? You can't go too far in any direction without someone coming in and scooping you up. Hold on, come back here. The report that he was given was that everyone feared him. He appeared possessed, berserk, amok, etc. It took 5 large men to subdue, and 5 times the usual dose of Ativan to tranquilise the body. This seems humorous now. There's no memory of it available for viewing, only a few lovely scars. An objective video recording of this trip would be the most amazing action film he could ever watch. The closest memory he has of that scene is being one of a cult of beautiful wise children that sit up in wooden apartments smoking psychedelic mushrooms all day. We speak in a language that's evolved from English and sci-fi lingo and is able to describe the otherwise incomprehensible experiences we share. One word retrieved into this world is hysteroid, which describes a mixed state of hysteria and psychoid traits. As in, I don't know what's up with him, he's been acting like such a hysteroid lately. Police came in, violent and ready to punish, and we were just like, oh, those guys, and ignored them. We knew there was no act more revolutionary than disassembling and reassembling reality in our own bedrooms. We were such perfect detached space explorers that the other poor humans' cries of protest and fear were less than the buzzing of dizzy flies. For the majority of the trip, there was no knowledge of ever having ingested a supplement called DPT, or any idea of Eric's life at all. There were a few flashes of the room, but it was wildly transformed into a savagely abstract version, with additional people, objects, new animals, furniture, etc. There was a recurring experience of being someone who had gone insane, and couldn't control the seizure-dancing body as it was propelled through life, running at 20 times the speed and intensity of ever before. He was being thrown bodily upstairs and down streets, through alleys and buildings and windows and plant life, and especially drowning in infinitely deep rainbow oceans. He saw morphing bodies and minds, faces exploding endlessly into a geyser of chaotic nature forms, and information living so violently inside the present moment that there was no memory, no time for history, and no anticipation, because every moment so incredibly bizarre and new that prediction itself would be ridiculous. The auditory information was a constant experience of weird echoing sounds, electronic-ish sounds formed physically, emotionally, visually present, many frequently resembling an unintelligible machine voice, or terrible freakish animal screams, or both. One world contained a sleek futuristic version of Eric and his friends, allies in a magical group based on revelations understood in a space accessible with a certain chemical key. This space shows this world, though through a lens so different that it becomes almost unrecognisable. You enter a wild stream of information that seems to be the raw chaos that permeates everything always. We call the knowledge gained in this space, in the state of receiving it, schizophrenic truth. One level of it, as you come closer back to your usual state, reveals life as a ride on an ever-blooming point, Hajit, or rather a continuous explosion of sensation channeled into the forms of your body and environment, which also is surrounded by infinite other pockets of experience, the collection of which is hyperspace, Knew It. We may access any of these points as rooms in an endless hotel, each room itself a universe, a complete life, or both, and travel as trans-dimensional nomads through alien territories until the chemical wears off, and we slip back into our home-based world with the obvious knowledge that it is one among infinite others inside the inconceivable freakiness of Mother Nature. Eric woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning, vomiting charcoal in New Orleans Charity Hospital, attached to a cartoon yellow catheter. The charcoal was for the fruitless project of trying to pump his stomach. Supposedly, the body was having seizures and later was put on a respirator. He signed a release from saying he would stop using drugs and collapsed into a taxi home wearing fat bleeding lips, a chipped tooth, many wide open smiling cuts, maroon bruises, and the world-famous asexual hospital gown. Once again, Eric had found himself in the wrong culture. Any good old South American shaman or shamaness would tell you that spitting, screaming, vomiting, seizing, thrashing, mutilation, and visions of the body's destruction and end are all part of the extraterrestrial voyage. In the days following this, the body was drained and weak, and feared that the world would dissolve into a ruthless, all-consuming mandala, and my precious animal incarnation would be game over. This fear is extremely useful for enjoying the moment-to-moment life. In the weeks following all this, each time we smoked cannabis, the DPT imagery would turn on in the visual display, and a few playbacks of 3D sounds were witnessed. While in meditation, certain sounds, voices and images bubbled up which seemed to be parts of the trip and mental recordings of the rescue squad's voices, as well as the roommate's voice trying to communicate with him. But even with the bloody drama and overwhelming emergency, Eric regrets nothing and considers this one of the most potent and educational days of his Earth life so far. Well, that was absolutely mental. A bit hard to follow due to the sort of loose nature of the writing, sort of riddle-like in some areas, but he was obviously more trying to convey the feeling than a by the numbers sort of, I experienced this, then I experienced that. He was trying to convey the essence of the experience, because it sounds like he went through some seriously ineffable transcendent state right here. Really interesting aspects to this. DPT is quite a crazy psychedelic. Some people say it's similar to DMT, but much stronger. Some people say it's even stronger than 5-MeO-DMT. It all seems very relative to the individual, but it can get pretty schizo from a lot of reports that I've read. Obviously, it can grant you extreme insights into the nature of source and reality and God, infinity, etc. But you also have to be very willing to lose your grip on sanity, and this goes for a lot of extremely heightened states of consciousness, even beyond ego death itself. Because you can still retain your sanity with an ego death. Obviously, if you resist it, you won't. You probably go absolutely crazy, like I have done many a time. But there's a point with psychedelics that go even higher that you will have to completely embrace insanity itself to realise the higher degrees of what consciousness is capable of. And if you're not careful with this, and you do have to be extremely careful, you can risk traumatising yourself mentally for a very long time. Because at the end of the day, this takes a lot of practice to really integrate, process, and understand whilst you're going through the experience. Because even if you might actually understand it at the time, like, oh yeah, I will embrace insanity and sort of be able to hack it, to be able to fully experience it without resisting it, the integration process can actually be very difficult, because then you'll come back to your sort of egoic, sane state, and that will create sort of like a conflict between what you experienced in the trip and what you're sort of processing and your normal day-to-day life, which will conflict with that. But thankfully, this guy did seem to go through a pretty crazy experience. He obviously had like, obviously started smashing up his room, the bathtub, and that, was vomiting, and it was sort of like a purging process, sounded pretty rough. But yeah, by the end of it, Eric says he regrets nothing and considers it the most potent educational day of his Earth life so far. So big ups, my lad. I'm glad to hear that it actually was quite profound and transformative for him in the end, because it could have easily gone the opposite way and traumatized and left a bad taste in his mouth. It's interesting again that he also states that when he smoked cannabis after the experience, that yeah, the DPT imagery would actually be turned on in a sense, and he would have sort of like a few playbacks of the sounds and imagescapes that he experienced, which again ties into the last video we did, and many times I've talked about how your brain, well, not even your brain, I could say your brain, your consciousness, your mind is rewired after having such a profound experience, and that psychedelics psychoactive substances like cannabis or whatever's gonna put you in an altered state is warped and twisted and amplified based upon your extreme psychedelic experiences. Obviously, again, I don't know if there's any scientific evidence towards this, but the amount of anecdotal evidence there is pretty overwhelming. It obviously affects people, and 100% affects me. I've talked about it before about how my most deep trip ever, before ACO DMT trip, completely changed cannabis for me, and now it is like 100% a psychedelic if I have more than a few tokes. If I just have one toke, I just feel like completely blazed, bruh. But if I have any more than that, it gets pretty deep, and I literally getting thrusted into a complete psychedelic headspace, even more powerful than any other psychedelic I've done. And I know a lot of people have messaged me on Instagram about that and emailed me saying they've experienced the same. So it obviously is a thing. Another interesting part about this was obviously that he went to hospital and had to consume the charcoal to pump his stomach. So it obviously sort of did toxify his body in a sense. It must have been pretty serious. I mean, it was a dose of 250 milligrams, which according to Psychonaut Wiki is literally a strong dose. And depending on this guy's weight, it could have been even stronger, say if he was quite a small stocky person rather than a large person. It could have affected him like twice as much as it would a larger person. I'll just read briefly the actual information about DPT from Psychonaut Wiki, as a lot of people don't actually know about this chemical. Even though I've featured it a lot of times on the channel, it's actually one of my favourites to report on because it's just so obscure and unknown amongst most psychonauts. I mean, so many people comment saying, "I've never heard of DPT before," and it obviously is an extremely potent psychedelic of the tryptamine class, and it's closely related to DMT, reported to be uniquely similar in its hallucinogenic intensity, albeit with a moderately longer duration and greater unpredictability relative to DMT and other psychedelic tryptamines. It was first synthesized in 1950. Human use was first reported in 1973, where it was researched in low doses as a therapy for alcoholism. It has also been researched in high doses to induce peak experiences for terminal cancer patients. It has gained some notoriety for its adoption as the primary sacrament for the Temple of the True Inner Light in the United States, a Christian offshoot organisation who believe in the ritual use of psychedelics and refer to them as the true flesh of God. So yeah, the Temple of the True Inner Light is actually this temple in Manhattan, which believes that entheogens such as dipropyltryptamine, or DPT, as well as THC, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin and DMT, to actually literally be God, and that religions such as Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, etc. originally believed that entheogens are the true God, with their Eucharist being dipropyltryptamine. Pretty interesting stuff. I mean, you can't blame them, can you? I mean, they definitely produce mystical religious experiences, so you can see why they've done that. Whether the origins of all these religions was literally entheogens themselves is something we could debate about for ages and ages and ages. There's lots of evidence for it, there's lots of evidence against it. Probably something I'll cover in a future video. I've obviously done how did the ancient Greeks use psychedelics, which is pretty likely that they did. Their Eucharist was it LSD? They found traces of LSD and ergot in in the Kaikion. Yeah, I believe that's what it was. And that's obviously was happening back then. And I mean, it's pretty obvious that throughout history humans have used psychedelics whenever possible. I mean, especially naturally occurring psychedelics like psilocybin in mushrooms and DMT and like ayahuasca, etc. So yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't really know much about this Temple of the True Inner Light. There's not really that much information. It's just that it's known of to be a place that consumes these for religious experiences. So quite fascinating. I'll probably do a video on them more in the future if I can locate any more research. If there's anyone out there in the viewership who actually has been there, please let me know, because that'll be absolutely fascinating. What's the crack in that gaff like? I want to know what's going on in there. Sounds fucking mad. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. Pretty crazy report, and I'll definitely do some more DPT ones in the future because I know you guys love hearing about it. So yeah, stay safe, children.